Ray. Spin, buddy. There you go. Good job. Good job, Ray. Press the button so you can get more music. Rock and roll. Good job, Ray. Hey, Amy. How are you doing today?
Good morning.
Good morning, Ruth. Glad you could join us. I always wonder, like on a Friday, how many people are going to come. It's like I have a list of things to do. It's actually not that bad today, but I know how it is. So
Fridays are my only free. Well, I teach one class on a Friday, so
okay, yeah,
but it's my most free day. So Fridays are good for me.
Same here, but like I always feel bad because I got a lot to try to do. We're gonna mute that iPhone there. No offense, whoever's on the iPhone. I remember once this fall at our department meeting, we had a woman who had been off for a while. And so she didn't want to teach remote. So she hadn't taught in the pandemic. And she had a hybrid face-to-face, but she was in the Zoom meeting. She hadn't used Zoom before. And so she was like on a phone call with it unmuted. I called her and interrupted the phone call to tell her because she would like, you're unmuted. We can hear your phone call. Oh, well. Hey, Matthew, good morning.
Morning.
Glad you could join us today. Oh, we have, I guess the iPhone is Heidi. Good morning, Heidi. I was just had one of these Facebook memories come up with my now 10-year-old on a little sit and spin. So cute. Oh gosh. What did we do before Facebook reminded us of our memories? How did we remember all those things? I don't know. Hi, Connie. Morning.
Good morning. How are you today?
I'm doing well. I'm on my second coffee and I had a chocolate covered graham cracker. So I'm sugared up and ready to go.
There you go. It looks like my camera's not working again. So sorry about that. I had to I don't know what's going on. I did it yesterday too. So.
It's all right. I could choose multiple angles.
Well, I think that's what's happening. Is like, oh, here you go.
The front angle.
I was using the document camera and it seems to have mixed it up and I don't know.
Yeah, sometimes if you look down, I don't know if you know how to choose the camera if you're already doing that, but if you go by the stop video on the bottom and do the pop-up arrow, then there might be multiple cameras as options there. So that might be. Yeah,
I did change it yesterday. See if it gives me an option today. It's only given me the one integrated web and I don't know why it used to give me a whole bunch of selections. So.
Yeah, I don't know.
Sorry about that.
Kevin and Ellen. Glad to see you. Glad you could be here. Finally got Ellen my president's letter. Finally. It only took me a while. President's message.
That's okay. Thanks. Whoops. Yeah.
You know, they're carefully crafted, right? You want to set just the right tone.
I could tell you put a lot of work into it. So
I even had it proofread by my resident proofreader, who I'm also married to.
That's good.
Morning, Jennifer.
Hey, internet is down today. So
it's exciting. A good day to lead a meeting. Yeah.
Isn't it? especially when my notes are internet based. And yeah, but thank goodness for my phone. Otherwise, we might not be getting much at all. This is.
Well, I guess I already offered to take notes, so I will definitely be the one taking notes if all you have is the phone.
All right. Well, you know what? This is what we're going to get. All right.
It's
So.
It's fine. It's fine. We were just chatting, so we haven't even started. Morning, Ted. Glad you could join us.
Hello, everyone. Hi. It's a
So,
great, wonderful day here. Nice. It's cloudy, getting ready to rain. So.
yeah. So my youngest has like intramural soccer where they play after school, and he's had 2 days rained out already, and today is a makeup day, and it's also got a chance of rain today. Like, what the heck?
Oh, that has to be a bummer.
He's so bummed. He's like, soccer is his thing, and like he plays competitive soccer, but this one is against his friends, so he's all like gung-ho, like, I'm gonna crush my friends. Like, just relax. It's just your murals. There's no trophy. Like, it's fine. Morning, Tony. Hello again. We meet again. Well, Jennifer, why don't I do the welcome and like do the introductions part,
Sure.
because I've got the bigger screen, so I can like point to people.
Sounds good.
Jennifer graciously offered to host with me today, and we had a plan and everything. Oh, I have a plan. It involves a poll. It is a long poll with many questions. No. All right, so I have a poll. Take your time. We kind of wanted to use this as a little discussion starter. Maybe we'll use it to kind of narrow down what we're talking about. This is really supposed to be a very open, broad discussion, roundtable. None of us are, well, I don't know. I am not an expert. Maybe you are, but we don't have any presentation prepared. We kind of, Jennifer has some ideas that she was going to share, and then we kind of want to have a discussion. So first thing I thought we should do is do some introductions. So what I'll do is I'll just go around my squares and have you unmute and kind of introduce yourself, where you're from, and then Jennifer and I thought it would be interesting to be like, well, why are you here? Like, what are you most interested in or most concerned about? Like, pick one kind of main thing. So I'm Dan Kernler. I teach at Elgin Community College. It's still odd for me to say, but I am the IMAC president for this year. And my biggest struggle is I suck at writing assessments for calculus. Particularly, we just finished integration strategies, and I had 4 students obviously cheat. Others might have, but part of it is like, I'm just writing like the same thing. Anyway, so it's not all their, I mean, it is their fault they cheated, but it's really easy and I'm not writing good assessments. And so I would really like some suggestions for that. But again, hopefully this is my last semester teaching it online, so we'll see. All right, so I'm gonna go, Ruth, you are the first square on my grid. So if you could unmute, introduce yourself and tell us why you're here. You are muted though still. There you go.
Okay, I'm Ruth Fabro from Kankakee Community College. I teach all different areas of math: developmental, gen ed, statistics, college algebra, trig, not the calculus sequence. We let Mike do that and Amy, but that's who I am. I'm also the math lead at KCC.
All right, thank you for joining us. Matthew, you're next.
Hi, I'm Matthew Lee from Oakton Community College. Most of my teaching experience has been in the college algebra and trig and up, with a little bit in general education mathematics. Yeah, I don't remember if there's anything else you wanted me to add to that.
All right. Yeah, thank you. That's great. Kevin. Oh, you actually just muted yourself. You were already unmuted.
That's my problem with Zoom.
Yeah,
I'm a
it's
Teams
okay.
guy. Kevin Hansen from Southwestern Illinois College. I think my biggest concern here today is we are still pushing for proctored exams for all our online classes, and hoping we can hold on to those, but the thread's getting thinner and thinner. So,
Ellen, you are next.
Hi, I'm Ellen Field, and I teach developmental mathematics at Wabansie Community College. I'm here because I like to learn about what people are doing for assessment. All my classes have been online for, well, a year and a half. And presently, I don't, I'm not using Respondus or any lockdown browser. It has been a concern of mine that my students are just struggling to get through as it is, and to put another obstacle in the way might reduce their chances of getting through. I mean, we just have a hard enough time getting them signed up for the homework platform. And we do have a lot of things in place for them, tutoring, and I'm available, all the time. But I haven't really been using something for assessment, because I figure they have to do well enough in my class to feel comfortable in a future class. And they're hurting themselves if they don't try to learn the material. So I guess I don't know if that's the right approach or not, but
yeah, no, it's an interesting viewpoint. I mean, I always say, like, I think of it as a spectrum, right? On one side, you can have super, super secure, right? And on the other side, you can be totally like open. There's consequences for being super secure. People forget about that. Like, it adds a lot of stress for students. They don't feel trusted. And on the other side, you risk more cheating, like might happen for me, because I do unproctored, untimed exams. And there are consequences for that too. So there's no perfect solution. Jennifer, you are up.
I'm Jennifer Reed. I'm at Oakton Community College. And, when Dan asked me to help out with this session, I was actually pretty excited, because this is the one session I wanted to go to and I wanted to learn from. And just as a quick background, when COVID struck, I was teaching two online courses. One was differential equations and one was stats. And I had already, had some issues with my differential equations class, where about half of my students, 45% of my students, were all from the same Big Ten university, as evidenced by the blank.edu email addresses. And within that population, I was already having people turn in assignments that looked kind of suspiciously similar to each other. And I had already filed probably 5 academic violations on this group. And then we went remote. And I thought, okay, well, I'm going to continue doing my written exams and using HonorLock. And there was only 2 time sessions you could take your exam. Either it was this block of time at 10 in the morning or this block of time at 6 at night. There was 2 different versions of the test. There was, lots of questions, compressed time, and people turned in the same stuff. And in watching the HonorLock tapes, one girl is sitting here and staring out the window for 7 minutes and then frantically starts writing, and then staring out the window and frantically starts writing. And when I had a conversation with the student at the end of the semester and explained why she was going to fail the course and have some more consequences, because this was not her first time being written up, she said, well, it's not like I paid for an A. And that's when everything kind of dawned on me, that there was this massive ring, and you pay for the letter grade that you want, and all this stuff. So my response to that was to teach statistics from then on out, because stats was a little harder to cheat at. Although after 5 semesters teaching summer, fall, winter, spring, summer, now we're at fall, I said, I'm kind of statisticked out. And so I'm teaching Calc 1 for the first time since COVID. And like you, I am really, really bad at writing what I think is good assessment questions. And so what I started doing in Zoom was you had your online component of your exam that was taken in honor lock and whatnot, but that only counted for 75% of your exam. And the other 25% of your exam score comes from a live one-on-one with me in Zoom, where I put on PowerPoint, here are your 3 questions, and you need to talk me through them. And for most students, I can, prompt and give a little bit of hint and give a little bit of leading, and it helps their grade. And I can really understand what they know and don't know. But I had a 0, I had a 15%, I had a 21%, and I had a 43% this semester. And I'm like, how? I mean, how? So we invited Matthew Lee to come with us today and share just a little bit of what he's doing, and you'll hear from him in a little bit. But I want to hear from everybody else as well, what you're doing in your classes that has worked, hasn't, and I would love to see the results of that poll.
Well, we are still doing introductions.
Oh,
You got
sorry.
it, Jennifer. So we're still doing introductions. So I'm going to share the poll in a second. We got 4 more people. Ted, why don't you go ahead?
I'm unmuted now. Hi,
Good.
good morning, everyone. I'm Ted Jankowski. I'm from Wilbur Wright College in Chicago. It's one of the 7 city colleges of Chicago. Anyway, I've taught everything up until Calc 1. That's the highest I teach. Everything until it all changed this semester. I was volunteered to become the developmental ed math coordinator for our department. And so I've been given release time, so I just teach only 2 courses instead of 4. But anyway, I have more time now to reassess or my own assessments.
Sure.
But the reason why I'm here is to see what everyone else is doing for cheating, to prevent cheating. What seemed to work for me pretty well so far was to I use my open math or my math lab. I give them a time limit and force them to upload their notes, and that seems to help. But I know some are cheating. I can't figure out what to do. But to make matters worse, I discovered some websites out there, not just Mathway or those types of websites that help students get the answers, but there are websites where you can hire professional math people, I guess math teachers who have gone to the dark side, and they'll actually do everything for the student. They'll do an exam for them. They'll do homeworks. It's terrible. So anyway, I just want to know what everyone else is doing and to see what, just a sample of what everyone else would suggest, suggestions.
Excellent. Tony?
Tony Paris at Carl Sandburg College, Western Illinois, almost by Quad Cities. I teach gen ed math. I do college algebra trig, and I do the calculus sequence. Plus, I'm the math coordinator here too. So,
All right. Thanks. Connie?
Hi, I'm Connie McLean. I'm the math department chair at Blackhawk College, very near Tony and in the Quad Cities. And I apologize, my camera's not working today, so I've got to figure that one out before next week. I'm as department chair, one of the things that I'm seeing with a lot of my instructors is they're just losing the quality of their lives trying to catch cheaters. So I've got people going over the edge, really looking at weird problems that are solved and picking up some of these different apps that will solve things, checking all of them, finding the fact that they are using these apps to, and I look at them and I think I appreciate what you're doing, but they're watching every Respondus Monitor video in detail. I mean, they have no life. If they want to catch the cheaters, they literally have no life going after them that way. And I'm teaching a face-to-face class this semester, which is glorious, and then an online course, and then a synchronous. So I have 3 different sections, 3 different formats. So it's been kind of interesting. And I've also tried the oral quiz, like I think Jennifer, somebody was talking about earlier, and that's been phenomenal. And I'm doing that with my online class. And I wish I could had time to do it with my face-to-face ones now and even my synchronous, because it's been so positive. But it's a big issue, and I don't know what the solution is.
Yeah, and that one, to your point about the time, like I did one last semester and it was really fun. It was really cool, but gosh, did it suck so much time. Like it's not practical for every single thing.
No, it wasn't.
Amy, go ahead. You are up next.
Hi, I'm Amy Madden from Moraine Valley. I teach a variety of the math courses, mostly transfer level. One of the reasons I'm here is because I know I've been we've all been just sort of figuring out during the pandemic, waiting for it to end. But now I'm pretty sure, and I think Kevin brought this up, that our school is really going to push for online courses to require no visits to campus. And so have no proctoring available for online courses. So while we might transition back to our normal schedule pretty soon, we are going to have to sort of figure out what the expectations will be for assessment and online courses. And there's at least a couple of faculty who really don't want to use any proctoring software for a variety of reasons. So just trying to figure out moving forward what we'll be doing. I'm also going to tell you that once I mute, I have to jump in the car, so I'll just be listening for the rest of this.
That's totally
Thank you.
Totally fine.
Thanks.
Olga, welcome. We're just doing some introductions.
Good morning. I'm from Oakton Community College. First of all, I'm here in support of the best chair ever, Jennifer. So I know she's leading this session. And secondary, because you always want to learn something new, right? That's the main reason.
All right. Welcome. So I'm going to share these poll results. You can see that the biggest one that people are interested in talking about is developmental courses. But there's interest across the board. In terms of the assessments, I thought this was really interesting. So if you go and look at, in particular, the unproctored exams, so it's very common, but when you scroll down for this sample who are here today, it's not very common. So that's kind of interesting that, we don't know how that reflects the state of our colleagues across the state, but in terms of the people who are here, that's not something that most people are comfortable with, is the unproctored.
I was going to say, you said it's uncommon, but it's still common, but we're just not comfortable using it.
There you go. So we might be doing it, but we're not comfortable.
What are you comfortable with?
Right. Are you comfortable? That's a good point. Yeah. There's really nothing I'm comfortable with right now. None of the above. None of the above. Projects are good in statistics, though. I have a good semester-long statistics project I use, and that's awesome. It's impossible to cheat. Well, it's not impossible. Someone could do it for you, but it's really hard, and you can make them do a presentation at the end, and if it's not their project, they're kind of screwed. So I know Jennifer, like Matthew is here to share some thoughts with us. Do you want to talk about the poll now, and does anything come to mind, or do you want to have Matthew jump in? What are you thinking, Jennifer?
Well, Matthew's approach is a little bit different than the poll results. So why don't we stick with the poll for a little bit? And I think somebody hit the nail on the head with, we're doing it, and we're doing a lot of things that, we aren't comfortable with. And I'll tell you, I don't like having to do oral one-on-ones with people because it does wonders to your course drop rates. I think I might have the highest in the whole department. It's astounding. But it really does give you a sense of who knows what. And somebody said, I would love to bring this back to my face-to-face classes. I would love to incorporate this in my other, and yeah, I agree. And I think since COVID, teachers and people in the medical field have had to do things very differently than they have in the past. And the way that the amount of stress on educators has been astounding. And I don't think that if anybody had told us when we were, going through school and getting our bright, shiny degrees and thinking, hey, let's go teach for a living, but this is what it's going to look like, I don't think any of us would have signed up for this. because as somebody indicated, we spend so much time policing. I don't enjoy watching honor lock tapes to see if the student who is taking the exam is the same student that was in at the beginning of the semester. I have them do like the day one. They have 3 days to upload take me somewhere you like, someplace that makes you happy, and just talk. Why'd you bring me here? What's something special about you? Just to get a natural, I want to get to know them. But then I know who's taking the tests. And if the face in that video doesn't line up to the face in the other videos that I'll see later, something's wrong. And I don't enjoy this at all. I really don't enjoy playing cop. And so the poll results indicate a lot about, I didn't see that anybody's doing discussion boards. Is that right? Was that what the poll showed?
Yeah, the poll said that no one's comfortable doing it.
Okay.
To Ruth's point.
Right.
Doesn't mean we're not doing it, but both for discussion boards and projects, no one checked those for that they're comfortable using those.
I think it says a lot that we know from best practice that, maybe we've been to some talks and we've been to some things, and we know that student engagement is huge, and things like discussion boards or projects or groups or these kinds of things to draw students into our content are helpful and awesome, but we just aren't comfortable using them. And I'm going back to a face-to-face environment for the spring for the very first time, and I'm actually really excited about it. I'll be teaching a Calc 2 class, and I can't wait to hand my students a piece of paper in a class in a 1-hour session, collect those pieces of paper, and be done with it. Because assessment in an online world just sucks so much more time and effort and energy, and being able to grade everybody doing the same question instead of things that are pooled and algorithmically changed. And, I'm really looking forward to being back in a face-to-face environment in the spring. But that's not to say that.
Yeah, sorry, Jennifer. Go ahead.
Go ahead. No, I was going to say that doesn't mean that everything that we've learned about teaching online leaves. Certainly there's been a lot of good things that we've learned about teaching and assessing in an online environment that I hope we keep with us for years to come.
I'm wondering if anybody has had any luck, like still doing exams, maybe the way you traditionally would, where you'd have an exam that you would distribute to students, but you're like just writing very different types of questions that can't just put in a program. Like I did one that way on the last test that worked well, and it was an integral. It was just an integration test, but I said, do the integral 2 different methods. So you can look up on your integral calculator, but it's only going to give you one method. And so you have to show 2 different methods. And I thought that worked well, but I just did it for one. I didn't do it for all of them because not everyone works well with 2 different methods. But I was wondering, like, maybe I should have just asked just different types of questions, not just do this integral, but I don't know, just rephrase it. So I don't know if anybody's had any luck for your exams, like you're still doing exams, but you're not asking questions the way you used to ask them.
I know my questions have changed.
How so?
Well, so in my Calc 1, I don't allow them to use calculators. I put a calculator on screen for them. But even if it was a face-to-face, I'm that old school person that won't allow an Inspire in my classroom, because, when you hit the chapter that I'm about to start of graphing, without a calculator, and if that's all I needed you to do was to produce a graph, well, your calculator can do that for you. And so rewriting questions that get at, what's the crux of what are we really trying to find by asking someone to graph without a calculator? Where are inflection points? Where are, and rewording things And I almost feel like I'm writing for the AP board in some of these, that, the way you kind of have to twist your questions a little bit so they're less Googleable, if you know what I mean.
So Kevin had a question in the chat, and I wonder if we can just either nod our heads if anyone wants to chime in. It seems like, based on the discussion, that none of us are really satisfied with the current online proctoring services as like productive anti-cheating tools. Does that seem accurate? Or is anyone okay with them? They seem to be working.
We have some issues with Respondus. Not all students can use it based on their type of device, so I don't use it.
Right. I remember one of them, like Chromebook, it didn't work. I don't know if that's Respondus. Is that, yeah. So I think you're right, Kevin. And for me, I see it the way you do it too, is like, it's either traditional tests with some like certain percentage of students cheating much higher than in a traditional classroom, or some other way to assess their knowledge and skills. So that's how I see it as well. I don't know if everyone can, if you have any thoughts on that. So maybe Jennifer, maybe now is the time to let Matthew. So Matthew's not just saying, so the way I understand the reason you're here with us, Matthew, thank you for taking time out of your day, by the way. So it's not just like, oh, here's a different assessment device or a different way to stop cheating. It's like a different way to look at assessment altogether. So
Yeah, that's accurate.
Want to take the floor or take the screen?
Sure. I'm using a method called mastery-based grading, or some people refer to it as standards-based grading. And here, I'll just show you, this is a file that I use this is my list of standards in my Calc 1 course. And so basically, at the end of the day, these are kind of the main topics that I would like my students to have an understanding of when they leave my class. And you might notice that some of these standards have a little asterisk next to them. And down below, that's because those are listed as core standards. So if you really want to pass this class, you have to know the core standards. And I have a table which tells you, based on your level of mastery of each of these standards and the number of standards that you've mastered, what grade does that earn you? There are 2 levels of mastery. Well, technically 3. There is the no mastery whatsoever. There is kind of the halfway mastery, and there is the complete mastery level for each of these standards. When I give students an assessment, all of my assessments are cumulative. But I tell you exactly which standard this question is covering. So I might give you an exam and you will see, question number 5, this is standard, L5. And I have just cut and pasted directly from this file what each standard is, like written like on the front page of the exam. So you look at the question, he says, oh, this is standard L5. You can go back to the first page, see what information is on, and then attempt the question. When I grade the assessment, if you get that question, if you have mastered that standard, then I give you credit. I bump you up 1 level of mastery. If you fail, if you don't meet the desired level of mastery, then I ask you to go back and revise your exam answers. And then students have to go through it's a 6-step revision process where basically they have to reflect and revise and then do a brand new problem. And once they've shown me that they've done this reflection, they've done this revision, and they've done all of that correctly, then I give them a brand new question outside of the the exam setting. And I have them record a video, or when we come back to in person, I'll have them kind of do the question in front of me to demonstrate that they actually learned through this reflection and revision process and have now actually mastered this standard. And if they've done this revision process all the way through and done all the steps I've asked them to do, then I bump them up one level of mastery. Okay. Now, all of the exams are cumulative, but once you have hit that top level of mastery, you can ignore questions on that standard for the rest of the semester. You have demonstrated you have full mastery of this standard. I don't need to check you anymore. That's the kind of the general premise. So yes, they're all cumulative. So it makes writing exams a little bit annoying because you have some of those standards that you tested on at the beginning of the semester. They show up on every single, I call them knowledge checks. They're not exams, they're knowledge checks. I want to know, what have you learned since the last time I asked you what you know? So they're really knowledge checks. And so if a student has a bad, if a student has goes through a rough period in their life, no big deal. Just one knowledge check, it's not going to hurt you. Just show me that you've learned it by the next time that you've done a knowledge check.
Can I ask you a quick question, Matthew?
Sure.
So you talked about when they have an exam, I'm just trying to make some notes here. So when you have your knowledge check and student doesn't show mastery on an item, they can do some work on it, revise it, and then submit that video to you in this format. But then you're also, so they can move up on the standard grid from the video or from the next exam, or both?
Both.
From both, okay. So they can do that reflection and submit a video to move up, or they could also wait for the next knowledge check and do it on the next knowledge check.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
So here, let me grab my other file here. So here is this is kind of the file I get them, which is this is kind of the overview of what master-based grading is. This is actually one that I used for my general education mathematics course. And so the numbers are a little bit different in terms of the cutoff points. In general education mathematics, we have to cover 4 different modules. And so I basically have split my standards between those 4 different modules. And because this is kind of these are 4 completely different sections, right? It's sets, it's logic, it's finance, it's counting and probability. If I want to pass you in this course, I want to know that you've demonstrated, mastery in each of these different modules. And so one of the criteria that I have in this course that I don't have in calculus is I need you to show me, mastery in each of these 4 different topics. So there's a little bit of changing the phrasing here in this file to kind of accommodate for that.
Matthew, did you see Connie's question in the chat? She was just kind of wondering how you manage your time. And obviously this isn't, you just didn't do this for the first time. So you've been doing this for a while, so you've got some proficiency. So how do you manage the time commitments?
Yeah, so so a lot of these things are I set a lot of the ground rules up front. So for example, if you want to do revision, you have to, there's a 5-step process that students have to do on their own that they submit onto my lecture management system. I review, and then I decide to give them an additional problem. And I tell them that, you have to get that done and let me know that it's there, some amount of time before I give you this new problem. And usually some of these questions are I can just, come up with one on the fly, write a question really quickly and hand it to you. I find that a lot of students actually don't take as advantage of the revisions as I thought they would. I find that what it is that there is a small handful of students that do a whole bunch of revisions and a bunch of students that don't do any. And because I'm checking for mastery, I don't care. I don't check all the individual. I don't have to go into the nitty-gritty details of what a student did wrong, right? If I'm grading an exam question, the instant I see you make a mistake, revise it. And you can give whatever level of feedback that you want. So at the beginning, when I was first trying this out, I would just say revise. And I would give you some hints based on in my rubric, revise because this is a computational error. Revise because you didn't read the directions. revise because there's some error that I don't know how to classify it, but I have like a catch-all other error column. So the instant I saw that you made a mistake, I click the appropriate box in my rubric, and you get told that you have to revise it. So I save a lot of time on the exam from the exam grading perspective. And the same thing when I'm reading the revisions. If I see that there was a mistake that was made, I would tell them, hey, you made a mistake in your revisions on, in this step of the revision, go back and fix it and try it again. And so that's kind of where I save a lot of my time in grading for this course.
Oh, thank you.
So-
Thank you.
Keep talking for a few minutes. What do your tests look like? Are they, so you're teaching remotely right now? And are you using like Pearson's My Labs to administer, or are you using handwritten exams that you then upload to HonorLock, or what does the test look like for you? And how do you create, since it seems like people could be, the first test for everybody might be very similar, but after that, it kind of sounds like all bets are off based off of how they're doing. Can you talk a little bit about what your exam administration and creation process is like? Yeah.
So when I was starting with this, I was, so I handwrite all my exams. I think exam testing is something that I don't trust a computer to do, because there are so many times where I've seen homework systems mark an answer as wrong because I put like a lowercase L instead of a capital L. Like, I don't want to be that nitpicky about things, or I actually put a space after a parenthesis, like, small things like that. I don't trust a computer system to for something as important as a knowledge check or an exam. In the past, I did use online proctoring systems, but it doesn't match up with my philosophy for teaching. I think there's a huge equity issue when it comes to these online proctoring systems. And also, it's a kind of a surprise additional cost to the student, because the student doesn't know I'm using HonorLock until they show up on day one in the class and they see my syllabus. And they see that it's going to cost them an extra however many dollars to pay for this online proctoring system. And so just from those standpoints, I kind of don't, I don't use them. So what I do instead is I basically just say, it's a 24-hour take-home exam. And what I do to kind of compensate for that is I kind of elevate kind of what my standard for mastery is. So if I'm doing a question about compute the income tax or compute the sales tax on something, and I put in the directions round to the nearest dollar, and you don't round to the nearest dollar, it's wrong. You didn't follow the directions. It's 24-hour take-home exam. You have the time to go back and revise, reread the directions. So I kind of elevate my standards from that perspective. When it comes to exam creation, I create one exam and everybody gets the same exam. So it doesn't matter if you've mastered this topic or not, everybody gets a copy of the same exam. And that way I don't have to have 50 versions of the exam floating around if I'm teaching, two copies of the same course.
And so then what do you do to address integrity? Since a lot of the questions that we saw earlier were based off of, do you proctor, do you not? How do you, do you have very short times? Do you open it up? How have you found that to be in your courses?
I haven't, it was a comment that was brought up earlier. I don't feel like that's where I want to spend my time. I feel like I'm going to burn myself out so much faster if I'm going to try and police that every single time. From what I've seen, and I've taught this, during the normal school year and during the summer as well, that most of the students who are actively involved. They're coming to my student hours. They are doing revisions. Having conversations with them tend to be the ones who are actually, hitting that mark for an A, are doing really, really well in the course. I do look through the solutions. And sometimes I'll ask them to, write me a few sentences about explaining how you got to that answer. So, because some of the questions might be, if I'm asking a question on sets, I might ask you, is this an element of a set? And that's it's a very easy yes, no question, but I might ask you a little bit more, explain why is this an element of the set? Take a quick little sentence of like, oh, this letter is A is in this list on the other side, therefore it's an element of the set. So I try to do things like that, where I ask them to put their own words on the page, and not just give me a bunch of math symbols. And this also allows them to be a little bit more expressive of kind of the way that they are thinking about things and processing things.
I mean, that's a really good point, Matthew, about just writing and asking students to explain their reasoning for some particular question. Like I'm trying to just look on the integral calculator right now, because that's what in my mind. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's like I'm looking at an example now and it just does the problem. It says, perform this trig substitution, but it doesn't say like why. Yeah. Why do that? So asking students to explain their reasoning about why they made that choice and why they did that step might be a good solution to Kevin's point about some non-traditional ways to assess their knowledge. I don't know. I worry that sometimes that whole skill-based thing, there's just, you almost lose the ability to just assess a skill. You have to also just assess reasoning. I don't know. Yeah. Does this prompt any other questions? I'd like to hear from some other people. Ruth, you were going to chime in. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, when it's just a skills-based test, there's a ton of cheating. And so what I do to combat that a little bit, and I still will have students get their work from somewhere because I require them to show their work. So even if it's an online exam where you're just entering answers, they're required to submit their work. But even then, they get the work from somewhere. But what I do to combat that is, and again, I won't do it for every question, but they have to explain all of their steps. Like, what did you do here? You added, you added 5 to both sides of the equation. And so they had to justify each of their steps. And so that's kind of how I've tried to combat it. But it makes the test much longer. And then you have to decide what and there are time constraints. I make time constraints, but not maybe for that type of test where they have to explain their reasoning. I would do longer than in a in-class type of test.
It's really interesting.
So
there's
Matthew,
a question from Kevin in the chat, but I want to keep talking about this first. So Ellen, you were going to chime in, and anybody else, you can raise your hand in Zoom or just physically raise your hand.
Okay, thanks. Matthew, I admire the integrity of your assessments. I really do. I think it's an interesting way about making sure that the students are learning the objectives of the course. I have a question. So you say that you give the same exam to everybody, but they won't need to do the standards that they have already mastered. So do they keep track of those standards that they have already mastered, or how is that done?
Yeah, so in the grade book, so when I set up my grade book, I labeled the columns in a way that can refer directly to the standards. So you saw on my calculus, I would have, in my grade book, I would have L1, L2, L3 for all my, limit standard 1, limit standard 2. When I was using an online proctoring system, and when we go back to being in person, I will allow the students to have a note card on the side that says, make sure you try standard number 3, L3. Don't do these questions. right? Or if they wanted to write down a copy of their grade book, because basically I gave them a score of 0, 1, or 2 to represent their level of mastery. That way they can refer back to their note card and say, I can skip this question. They can just literally just cross the question out if they want to make sure they ignore it. So that's the way I handle that.
Thanks.
Yeah, I also want to say a few of the issues that I've run into with this, because I think it's also important to mention when we're talking about these different assessment methods. The first one is kind of obvious. It's the buy-in. This is completely different. Like, I don't think I've ever had students who've seen this method of assessment before, this way of assigning grades before. And so there is a very big issue with buy-in at the very beginning. It's not really until maybe the middle of the semester that the students who have been doing this revision process really understand why this is beneficial to them. And I find that a lot of students tell me that it's less stressful to take my knowledge checks, because they know if they get it wrong, they can go back and do a revision process on their own time to get it back. So that's a big issue. There are people who use this with projects. So they say, here's a project, and they kind of will have standards associated to that project. And that's how they will, basically grade a project. I haven't figured out how to do it with the way that I want to structure the course, the courses that I run. And then also how to incorporate the written homework aspect into this. Because one of the issues with the way that I'm currently running these courses is they see the online homework and they see the knowledge checks that I'm writing. And other than the knowledge checks that I'm writing, they never see the way that I write questions or the way that I write directions for questions. And I think that's a very valuable thing to help students be more prepared for my knowledge checks, especially that very first one, is if they see an example of how I like to write questions and the type of detail that I'm going to ask them for, because the online homework's not going to ask them for those details. So there's a question then of how do I incorporate the written homework into this general scheme of assigning a grade at the end of the day? Or if I do it all, do I just say, here are some sample problems that I hand wrote for you to practice on, and just say it's practice, and it's going to be some ungraded assignments that they can do it at their own leisure. So that's those are some of the issues that I've kind of run into overall.
Thank you so much for sharing. I want to, go ahead.
I have a
Ruth,
question.
Yeah.
One of the issues with assessment is integrity. And so I want to hear, Matthew, you talk about, your issues with cheating. Like, you're giving everybody the same problems. Is it just their explanations that show that they're not cheating? Or, I'm assuming, do you go back and ask them? Because I know you mentioned that with, you explain your reasoning and your answer. Is that how you take care of where you notice people are all turning in the same work, that you don't really give them mastery until you've talked to them?
There are some questions that are, it's weird to say this, there are some questions that are so involved computationally that it's really hard for them to cheat. Like asking the student to do like an income tax computation. It's so involved. There's so many steps and it's so involved. And even when I break it down, I find that that's the type of question that students, I don't necessarily believe that students are cheating on that, even though some of them might be. But like I mentioned before, it's not. I know that integrity is important, but right now that's not what I want to be focused on. And I know that at least anecdotally from other instructors who use this method, they find that the amount of integrity issues that they run into kind of goes down from using this method, because it's less stressful, right? One of the reasons why our students cheat is because they're super stressed out. There's so much weight on this exam, and now I'm just said, in a certain sense, if you miss it, I've had students completely miss knowledge checks, and I say no big deal. Like there's going to be another one. I've got to mention I do like 6 knowledge checks over the course of the semester, so it's not like 3 knowledge checks. Hopefully you get them all done. Hopefully you do well on each of them. There are 6 knowledge checks throughout the semester, and I think that with the number of knowledge checks, I think it makes sense for me to continue doing them, sort of unproctored, 24-hour take-home exam style. Because how am I going to find 6 days that I can spend, giving a knowledge check to my students? And that actually reminded me of one other issue that I actually don't know how to solve, and I actually don't know if there's a way to solve this. Is what do you do if there's a standard that you're teaching that you really want them to know that you're teaching in the last like 2 weeks of class? Because they're going to see I have 2 knowledge checks at the very end. I kind of have the last exam and then the final. And the problem is that those 2 knowledge checks are so tight together, and there's not a window of time after the final knowledge check for them to be able to do revisions before I have to submit final grades. And so I don't know how to solve, and I don't know if you can solve this issue of, hey, 2 weeks before the end of the class, there's a standard that you need to master. Or even if there is a stack of standards that happen between like knowledge check 3rd from the end and the 2 knowledge checks at the end, because all those standards are in the same boat. And I don't know how to solve that issue.
I would like to, since we're kind of running out of time, I'd like to get to that question in the chat. Can everybody see that about multiple ways of grading questions? Has anybody given any thought to that? Oh, yes, Matthew.
Let's let Kevin address this, because he
sounds good.
Question, and then I think Matthew has a point too. So go ahead, Kevin.
So this is actually something I have done in the old days of face-to-face classes. I'd let students choose whether they wanted a project intensive grade, a test intensive grade, a quiz intensive grade, depending on what they thought they did best on. But in practice, I made them pick, but I always calculated their grade on all of those measures. And much like our placement measures these days, gave them the highest grade that they earned on any of those. I'm wondering if I can do the same, and those students that are willing to come on campus, take a traditional test, encourage that audience to do that, but then come up with something that works better for those that can't do that.
Matthew, you want to chime in here? You had some thoughts on the different methods, the different letting students choose their grading option.
Yeah. So I, in the spirit of mastery, right? There's a whole bunch of different ways for you to demonstrate that you have mastery of a topic, right? If you sit down, you have a conversation with another math person, you get a general sense of what their knowledge level is in a very short period of time. I kind of demonstrate this to my students. I had a class where I asked them to pick a random topic, and I would try to talk about it for a minute. And so I had a class that asked me to talk about makeup for a minute, and they knew in the first like 15 to 30 seconds that I knew absolutely nothing about this topic. And so I think in the kind of in that style of teaching, that I should be allowing students to demonstrate their mastery in a number of different ways. And I think that I will be more than happy to allow a student to record a video and post it online. I will probably continue to have sort of scheduled knowledge checks where I will, so the students who want to take a paper exam to demonstrate their mastery. The thing I've got to figure out is how do I allow students who are opting not to do it via a paper exam? How am I going to allow them to demonstrate mastery on multiple topics in a concise, efficient method? In a concise amount of time through some efficient method. And, in person, some of this will be meet me in my office, we'll do a couple problems on the board. That's quick and simple, it's easy. And I can tell them, yes, yes, mastered, no, not mastered. Let me know, if you want to come in and do that, let me know X number of days ahead of time so I can prepare some questions for when you come in. For students who want to do videos, something similar. I'll give you a little bit of, like a window of time for you to create your video, record your video, submit your video. That way you're not spending a week creating a video, right? This is what you're master. You're supposed to have it, off the top of your head per se. But I also want you to produce a video that you feel comfortable with. So I have thought about that. And I think in the spirit of mastery-based grading, it makes sense to go that route.
Well, I mean, it's a really good point that when you're using mastery-based learning, that immediately lends itself to letting students choose different assessment methods. So does anybody else have any thoughts? We just have a couple minutes left. To Kevin's point about, if you're still using some more traditional assessment methods, or, have you given two different options, or does that sound appealing, or do you have any concerns about that? Does your administration, because I worry about my administration having a red flag about students being assessed differently. I feel like they would worry about that. I don't know. Did that ever come up, Kevin, or are they just like, no, or do they not know what was going on? Or
They don't know what they don't get told, right?
Right, exactly. So
no, so my concern has always been that we have departmental grading restrictions that are very much based on a traditional grading mechanism, right? So I use this primarily in some of my gen ed classes where I felt like I wasn't going to be upsetting anybody down the road if I said, if you want to do 4 projects instead of 4 tests to convince me these 4 sets of material, I'm fine with that.
mm-hmm.
I have to say, I took a class that I remember that it was an assessment class that encouraged us to use different types of assessment because that's actually part of universal design. I thought it makes it more equitable for people when they're learning, because not everybody learns the same way.
It's interesting.
Just seems to me that may be a different way to address the we don't like traditional tests in a online environment. I think we need to get to the point where if we want to stick to traditional tests and it doesn't work in an online environment, we need to come up with other solutions for the online environment.
Right. That's the crux to me is, still, even if you're going to give options, you have to craft a really good other option that's still assessing their mastery of whatever it is that you want them to learn. So,
yeah. There's a question I have too.
Yeah, Matthew, sorry. I just want to say that I value people's time and it's really busy. So I want to hang out for a few more minutes to chat, but I will not be offended if anybody has to take off. We filled our hour already. So just wanted to thank everybody for being here and thank Jennifer for her help. If anybody needs to go, I understand, but I'm happy to hang out and still chat for a few more minutes. So sorry to interrupt you, Matthew. Go ahead.
No. Yeah, I think one of the things I always think about when it comes to these multiple assessment methods is making sure that I'm having the same level of standards for each of them, right? A student who is choosing to take a paper test, there are certain questions that the student might ask that I'm not going to answer. But if that student's doing a problem on the board with me, there are certain facial cues that I might give off as they're working through the problem that somebody taking the test wouldn't necessarily pick up on. So that's one of the things that I kind of wonder. I kind of, as much as I want to do this, it's something that I need to figure out, how do I work around,
Right.
and how do I accommodate that when it comes to these different assessment methods.
Mhm.
Right. And to that point, I found that, as much of a time suck as it is to give oral exams to everybody and written exams to everybody, that, as you said, when I give that quizzical look, or I can redirect gently, or that's a huge advantage that you can get in one format that you might not get in another format. And how to, if you're going to allow students to choose, I'm going to do it this way, or I'm going to do it this way, how do you then give those hints? And
Right.
is it, ensuring that maybe I'm going to write my questions, if it's a written exam, not as a huge, find the area when you rotate this around, but step by step, what's your setup? What's your this? What's your that? And so based off of, those cues, and then you take their answer from part A. If it's wrong, but they do everything right from there on, that then some partial credit opportunities can arise. And, how do you then, being thoughtful about crafting assessment tools in all these different formats? Or if it's a project, maybe they have to do a check-in with you, so that if they are way off base, you can kind of gently steer. And that happens with my stats projects. I make them check in with me a couple times on these bigger ones, just to ensure that they're going down the right path. But I think it's on us to, give them more guidance in order to be, as you said, equitable. Because if it's something that we're doing with them and they can pick up on our facial cues, many of which I've learned to exaggerate, or, but some are very, oh my God, what are you doing? Just very natural and uncontrollable. But that's a great point.
Yeah, Kevin, were you going to add something?
Yeah, it just, one of the things that comes up here for me is our assessments are always designed to meet a particular student audience. And so equity is always an issue.
Mhm.
There's a big issue in my mind too of how students sign up for a course. So we all know that it's not necessarily the right students that take online courses versus face-to-face courses. And that's what I found when I was giving, these were face-to-face classes and I gave students these options. One reason I always wound up at, I'm going to give you your highest of all these different options. Students didn't have any clue what actually worked best for them. They thought they knew, they thought they wanted to do projects.
Right.
But 3 weeks into the semester, they knew, all right, that's not really me.
Right. That was one of the thoughts that I had, is like students might not always know what's the best choice for themselves. So they're making choices that are not great choices. So I'm going to take off, but I'm going to leave Jennifer in charge.